This past week I was in I was at lunch with a friend, a good friend, and we were talking about giving talks and communicating with people. And his input was that, the most powerful and successful public speakers are ones that give the same talk over and over and over again, at different places, obviously. And I said, boy, I would be bored to death with that. And he said to me, well, if you could distill down what it is that you have given as your message over the last almost 20 years, hundreds of talks with people, what would it be? And I dialed into myself and I said, God is. God is. Sometimes that seems a little eclipsed with the passages and so on that we move through, the transitions that we experience. And I said there's an addendum to that one singular message, is that people desire to be loved and love. To be loved and love. It's the actual essence of what feeds us and what keeps us alive. It is the very evidence that God is. To be loved and love. To have the opportunity to truly love ourselves and others and to receive love. During the period between March 14th and March 19th, I journeyed south to Arizona to see my mom. And she was in transition not from this life, but from her capacity to live independently. So I needed to go down and assess the situation. And I sat with the caregiver that was looking after her and had for the last 2 months, doing a great job. But, she was in her mid-60s, and my mom's situation was one where, and I won't go into detail around all of that, but she had some thrombosis embolism in her hip, and it was causing her a great deal of pain, and she needed to be hospitalized and then assessed and so forth, and she made a transition into a rehab center to gain strength. And the first night that I was there, I was talking with the caretaker, and I said, how is it for you in terms of the capacity, knowing the capacity of my mother's decline, how is that going to be for you in terms of continuing to care for her? Anyway, I was sitting at the table feeling actually quite exhausted from the trip and just the whole feeling around what it means to make these decisions for one's parent. Some of you have gone through this already, and some of you will go through it in the years ahead. But it was very stressful because, you want to honor your parent. You want to honor their autonomy and their freedom. And then there comes a choice point where they are no longer able to live independently. And the caretaker said, no, I can't really do this any longer. So there was a conversation that I had with my mom around change, around transition to another facility. And that was one of the hardest conversations I've had in a long time. Because there was this sense of, oh, I can take care of myself at home. No, she couldn't. So anyway, she's safely in a place now. And when I called to check in on her, she was surrounded by new people wanting to get to know her. But she still said, well, do I get to go home tomorrow? But I think and feel that she will adapt and adjust to this new environment because, truth be known, she was very, very lonely at home by herself, even though the caregiver was there. So naturally, the content of what I want to share with you today, I think, has relatability and connectedness with you, each of you in this room. Not only circumstantially with the eventuality of parents and so forth, many of you have already gone through this, but finding oneself in transition on this level also affords the opportunity for transformation. And 2 weeks ago, I was speaking about transformation and looking at that word, form. You and I are in form. We are in body. We are incarnated on the earth at this particular time. Our bodies are forms, and we live within a whole series of forms. This church, this center is a form. Our homes are forms. They're constructs of life. And I'm reminded of Dr. Carl Jung. I was reading his book on my Kindle back and forth from Arizona, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, a book about, well, his life, an autobiography. And at the age of around 60 years old, he had a near-death experience. And he found himself floating above the earth, as he said, about 1,000 miles above the earth, looking down on Africa and India. He said it was the most beautiful image that he'd ever experienced. This was back in probably the mid-1940s, before space travel, and he described it beautifully. And he didn't want to go back into his form, his body. But there was a voice, a presence that was near him that said, "You must return. There is still work for you to do. You must return to the world of boxes, of forms, so that we live within this world of boxes and forms, and we decry to the universe, I am in oneness, because we know that on a certain level we are one. But within this sphere, it feels like a continual set of boxes that we live in. And so my mother's box changed. And I was proud to be an assistance to her through that process, although it was very, very hard. And I remember going to see her when she was in the rehab place twice a day for a while. We would sit. But I felt all the while there was this distance. There was this inability to connect. And now that I reflect upon it, it was because of the tension that I was feeling around that all of this transition would turn out okay, that she would be safe and all right in this transition that she was making. And I wanted to honor her, but I also needed to be firm and to say, no, Mom, you really need to make this change. For 4 days, this pattern of resistance and guardedness was happening inside me, and I felt really, it was very difficult for me to experience that because I wanted to have a breakthrough. I wanted to have a moment of relatedness and connecting with her. I wanted to have some resolution with her because I knew that on some level she would be making her transition very soon. And I really needed to experience that. And the last evening before I left, I was sitting at her bedside. And there was this transition, a transformation that happened. The tension, the holding on or the holding back, it just dissolved. And there was peace and love. And I had this memory of one time when I was about 15 years old and I was sitting on the front lawn with my friend, and these other people came through the neighborhood that were not familiar to us, and they were not from that area. And my foolish friend yelled something to them. "What are you doing in our neighborhood?" And they stopped the car. And they came over, and this guy had this metal pipe. And then my friend runs into my garage and gets this big board, like they were going to do battle. I'm just going, what the heck is going on here? And then the guy that was driving the car goes into the trunk of his car and brings out a hunting rifle. And I'm like, oh my. And my mom, standing at the kitchen window, runs out of the house and says, "Hey, you all stop this. This has got to stop right this moment." And I had never seen such strength coming from my mom before like that. She overcame her own insecurities and was Mother Bear at that moment. And those two guys came to themselves, and they got back in their car and left. But boy, that could have been a different situation. Really different, really fast. So I was remembering this while sitting at my mom's bedside, unable to walk, forgetting just about everything that I said to her within a minute's time. It's hard. But still the love was there. And it took something beyond my intellect. In fact, I just had to let it all go and surrender to the situation. And what happened at that moment was the real came through. The real love that has always been there with her. And that reminds me of a dream that I want to share. Because, public speaking is really about relatedness and connection. I mean, you can get the finest orator and whatever. After Jennifer and I leave, he or she, in my mind and heart, need to be someone that connects with you, loves you, and stands with you during your transitions and sees transformation in your process of your transition, because that's what's waiting just behind the veil of circumstance. Life will come and live, it will do its thing, but what is true behind circumstance is the opportunity for transformation. And I remember, I'll tell you the dream in a minute, but I remember going home to my mom's home that she had lived in for 30 years. And I was just there by myself. And I remember standing in that home and going, wow, 30 years times 365 is 10,950 or something like that. That's a lot of days to be in one place. And all the experiences and everything that had transpired over that 30 years fell silent when I walked in that house. There was nothing happening other than my own presence, and I just had to be with that. And that wasn't easy either, because I really got it that this is a transition that is just happening, and all I can do is to surrender to it and to just recognize that there is transformation going on behind the transition. The transformation and transition are partners that walk on the road together of our lives. We always have this possibility of transformation as we're going through change. And I remember one morning just going out and sitting on the back deck at our home, overlooking the Arizona desert, just at dawn. Beautiful, quiet breeze, Venus in the starscape, and just starting to get some light. And I remember in my prayers and my meditation just letting go. And really just saying, thy will be done. It's a tough one. And it's relatable, I believe, to you in this moment, because we're all going through change. We're all going through transition. The whole planet is going through transition. And even now, did you know that the Earth is traveling at 67,000 miles per hour around the sun? Kilometers 105. And that the sun is moving at, I'm sorry, I'm American, 64,000 miles and whatever that is in kilometers in the galaxy. We are in constant transition. And yet, within our mental, emotional, and our humanity, our personal selves, we want to hold on. Because change, dramatic change, is difficult. Life is difficult until we remember staying here in our center. That's what got me through that time with my mom, because, everything else was changing. So what doesn't change? Being here, being in the heart, the spiritual heart, the I am of self. My dream. So, this dream happened about 15 years ago. I'm in this, and this is a lucid dream. Lucid dreams lucidity means clear. So this isn't a dream that was psychological processing or emotional releasing. This was something that was happening on another level that was so real. It was just as real as being right here, right now. So I'm in this car, this white Plymouth Fury. Interesting symbology. And I'm traveling along parallel to this river, and this river is like Niagara Falls on steroids. Okay? And it's going horizontal instead of vertical, but it is just like the most powerful river that you would ever see. And all of a sudden in the dream, there are two young children in the back seat, and they have the steering wheel. And these two children are what might developmentally disabled children, Down syndrome children, and they just take the wheel and they go down right into the river. So the car is floating, doing like Force 5 rapids through this river to the other side. And I am scared to death because I think we're just going to drown. But I look back and this young boy and his sister are just happy and joyful, and they're just saying, you just got to learn how to trust. And they're just totally confident. And the car is just moving through the rapids, up and down these mountainous waves, and then finally comes to the other side and parks. And it's totally safe. And they say, you're done. What is that telling me? Is that I really can't get through the river of life with my intellect. I have to trust in the innocence and the purity of my heart to get from one point to the next. Regardless of what the storm or the tempest appears to be. I'm sharing this dream with you because it's relatable for all of us. Carl Jung, after he had his near-death experience, he comes back into his body and he is so upset that he has to be back in the physical world. And he says that the world suffers from a plight of rationalism, reason. And I thought to myself, well, reason is important. The intellect is important. We have gained huge strides in medicine and space technology and communication and everything through reason and the intellect, and have also dispelled superstition about God. So very valuable and very wonderful. But we can only go so far. And I found that in my own transition with my mother, I needed to let go and allow and to trust. As I traveled through the tempest, the river of life that was surging so powerfully. So in conclusion, I wanted to share with you, so this is like, so what do we do? What do we do with all of this? I want to share with you a prayer that no doubt millions of people share every day. And it's called the Serenity Prayer. To stay serene within life as we live it. It is so familiar to us that it might seem redundant, but it is still appropriate for the moment. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as the pathway to peace, taking as he did this world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to God's will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with God forever in the next. Amen. So, I just want to read this last sentence that I wrote. Finding ourselves in transition requires moment-to-moment living, of reminding ourselves to stay present in the eye of any storm, and there finding our serenity. For when it is done and said, the elemental truth is, God is. Thank you very much.